So a little bit about us and our studio. My name is George Coffin. Jill and I both went to RISD, and I started in industrial design and switched to furniture design. And that is essentially what I do at our company studio, Den is sort of a combination of those two things. And we sort of get an opportunity to meet in the middle with interior design projects.
I'm Jillian Wiedenmayer. I also went to RISD, although we didn't know each other. I'm an architect, passive house consultant. I really kind of after RISD, I went straight to Boston and focused a lot on multifamily construction, larger scale architecture, and then went to New York to work on bigger and bigger projects. And I kind of always knew that it was going to be difficult for me to get to I just always knew that I wanted to start my own company, really. That being said, I basically have been freelancing on and off since I was 18, so it was always kind of a part of my trajectory.
So I guess before we talk about our company, I wanted to a little bit preface with like how we decided to start our own company and some of the things we observed working at larger companies, and curious to see if other people have had this experience too. So we sort of noticed like there was a correlation between as the years grew on with experience and your salary gets higher, all of a sudden, your admin work starts going up and your design work starts sort of crashing down. And there's this sort of moment that I've had, I think both of us have had, where we both feel like, well, I don't really want to be a manager. Like I didn't really get into design to necessarily be a manager.
Yeah, I think I love teaching people, but the type of work that I engage with every day, it became a little bit more administrative and a little less design focused, which made me unfulfilled.
Yeah, so unfortunately for us in our experience, that sort of correlated with our fulfillment. There's a bit of a sweet spot in there, but if you want to go any further and potentially go into management, we felt like that wasn't for us.
So I just wanted to just take a pulse of how everyone else is doing in their careers, whether, maybe does anyone have their own company that they're starting, or these are some examples of, I've been an unpaid intern for 3 years and I'm sick of it, or I'm a master of QuickBooks. How are you guys doing? Feel free to just shout out. Or you can chat if you.
All right, we'll keep it rolling.
Okay. George knew that was going to be the case, by the way.
So, along with this issue of kind of like management and admin stuff, we also noticed that a lot of the times working for larger companies, there's a very small sliver of kind of the company we work at versus the type of work that we admire and that we really want to be doing. And Jill and I both, freelanced for many years on and off before we started this. And the whole draw to that sort of lifestyle, I think, was more so that you can pick and choose your clients, and that maybe even if the projects you're working on aren't the sexiest projects, you are essentially more so in the creative director role, and you can sort of like push things in a direction that is more in line with like
I think I'm able to be, when the client, I have a personal relationship with the client, so I've said yes to the project for a particular reason. I'm more, it's more the work I want to be doing as opposed to, and I'm also building for myself as opposed to anyone else. And that gets me much closer to, the work I admire and the lifestyle I admire, and I can, often educate the clients on yes, we have this small budget, but there's so much you can do in terms of design. And that's just much more accessible to me.
So a little bit about how we started Den. I think similar to a lot of creatives starting their own thing. We had a spare room in our tiny Brooklyn apartment, and we decided to just sort of convert it into a studio.
I think it's important to note that, you know, we had full-time jobs so we basically met every Tuesday, if not more, for a couple years and started, you know, chipping away at what we wanted our studio to look like. That was a mix of clients we had coming in and then personally driven projects, kind of until George was the first one to really take the leap to go full time.
Yeah, and I mean, in this time, I bought a 3D printer, and you'll kind of see later in the presentation, like as far as like having our own sort of flexible remote practice, that has become a very integral part of it. And this is just another shot of organizing.
Also in comparison to like as an architect working in New York, I think just being able to prototype, make models, understand how everything fits together is super important to me. I know that everybody always says that, but it's like, I can't even, it's a part of our ethos really, that we have a huge, actually not so huge, it's only a closet full of supplies that we can just prototype lighting, products, whatever we really need to.
So from there, we started to ask ourselves, okay, so like, who are we? You know, what's the company we want to be?
Yeah, I think both of us had made, you know, I've never had a hard time getting freelance work, but I've had a hard time saying no to work and, you know, not being so client driven and, you know, being selective with the clients I want to. So,
yeah. Yeah, so actually as an exercise, it's part of an exercise. We worked with a graphic designer friend of ours, Mike Tully. Shout out to Mike. But as part of that exercise, he wanted us to just put together sort of like, what types of work do you want to be doing? What are companies that you sort of look up to? And so I started organizing, you know, work by companies, and it became very apparent, like, you know, we want to be doing client work, but we also want to be creating products of our own. And the things that we make, I want to be very minimal, but also have a very distinct sort of playfulness and character to them.
Yeah, I think this is a really kind of an underestimated question. Like really knowing what you want takes a lot of work, and it's especially now I feel like it's hard to decipher what I like versus what I see so much and what actually resonates with me. So having work that, well, this is like, I'm always searching for proportions and materiality. That's kind of the question that defines my work, which is what this slide is about.
So yeah, so from that exercise, then Mike sort of went to work, and you know, the question is, okay, well then what do we look like, and what is our brand characteristic? And for us, it like, I would say 2 immediate things that were like very important. One, we wanted to embrace color and playfulness, and 2, we knew from a very early point that our brand, we wanted to sort of have a division or 2 sides. One is more of a client-facing side, and the other is more of a product side. So when we launch our own products, so you can actually see anytime we're using Studio Den, that's more of a logo we use for the client-facing side of the business. Whereas, so we put that on like invoices, letterheads.
Any boring architecture document that we do
yeah.
is branded Studio Den Den.
Yeah, that kind of spruces it up.
And this is also part of, everyone's heard that idea where like millionaires have 7 streams of income. Is like, okay, we've got this architecture services, we've got the industrial design, and then we're building other products in line with that. That's kind of enabling us to have a very flexible way of making money, basically.
Totally. So anytime we're using just Den Den or the DD logo, that's more on the product side of things. This is just establishing brand colors,
making it super accessible, because I'm as personable as I can be. I know I'm not like a networker. Like I just going out and talking to people all day to get clients isn't my MO. And so we wanted to make our branding say, come talk to us, buy our shit.
Well, I think it's like, it's important. I've freelanced before just as like a means of getting by, and I've just done it under my own name. And I think there is like, I think there's something to say about establishing a company and figuring out a sort of brand and sort of making it more real to other people, but also to yourself. It's important. So from here, we sort of set out, and we had a pretty unique experience early on that really, even pre-COVID, led us to this thinking of, okay, maybe our studio isn't just headquartered one place. Like maybe we can figure out a way to work wherever we want.
Yeah, I think we're also in Brooklyn at the time, and we knew that was not just an opportunity. That wasn't, we're not lifers in Brooklyn. And we also really love traveling, and we want to buy a house and, you know, all these other lifestyle things. This is just a little snapshot of where we've been. And then there's a whole gray area where we haven't been at all. And that being said, it's, you know, it's a balance of, you know, when you work a corporate job, you get 2 weeks vacation, and when you work for yourself, often it's less. And on top of it, we, you know, our business isn't bankrolled by our parents or any sort of trust fund, and so trying to balance all these, juggle all these balls at once is important to us.
Yeah. So we had this very early on experience where we were actually going on a trip. It was my cousin's wedding in Armenia. And so we were planning on going to Armenia and Turkey and Georgia.
Actually, we weren't going to Georgia, but I ran into a friend of mine in the financial district, really. And she's from Russia, and she said, oh, I'm gonna be in Georgia next month. I know you're gonna be in Armenia. Come, I'm curating an exhibition at this artist retreat and make work. And so we took the night train from, I think no, it was, we got into Tbilisi, and it was this little artist retreat that basically 40 minutes outside of Tbilisi. And it was this guy that had basically bought this castle and invited all of his friends and would host these exhibitions every year.
So this is like an outdoor gallery space / sculpture garden. So it was cool because we basically stopped like smack in the middle of our vacation and did this like intense 48-hour art installation. And, you know, on top of that, we also met some really interesting, amazing people that we wouldn't have had the chance to meet otherwise, you know, other artists, writers, poets, painters.
That also were trying to like straddle the same lifestyle. Like Olya in the middle, she's wanted to be bicoastal. I met her in Rome. She's wanted to be bicoastal since the day she was like born, basically. And all these, and the writer in the like center also, he's from England, works in LA, also loves Georgia. And it started to create this network of people that had the same goal.
Well, and that we're already doing it. And so
and
seeing other people doing it was like, oh, maybe we could like actually do this, you know?
yeah, that is true. That it is possible. And I hadn't, you know, this was also such a stark contrast to, I've been working in downtown Manhattan, and it was just, architecture is so intertwined with where you are. It's, you've got a physical building, you got to go to the site, and they also, they're quite, I feel like it's the last profession to adopt or approve people for working remotely. So I've always kind of had that relationship, and I, you know, I, for years and years, was like, well, I'm just going to be a lifer in Boston or New York. Those are my only two options. So we diagrammed the problem, really, my location and my work, and we subbed out my location from my network. And so all of a sudden, now we have a quite international network of people that are trying to do the same thing. And that really opens up so many doors, especially in architecture. So it's not about me investing in my location, having the feet on the ground, but investing in the people that I interact with or can interact with in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying too that like, as crazy as this COVID thing has made the world, it's also kind of like primed the pump for doing this sort of thing. And so I would say if you're like thinking about starting your own thing or living this kind of lifestyle, it's a great time for it, because like people have to work, like people have to adjust to working remotely or working with people remotely, whether they like it or not. So,
well, it's also, people are much more open to have it. Like, I don't have to, if there's someone I want to work with or admire, I can ask them to like a Zoom coffee, as opposed to like being like, oh, let me take you out to lunch, and like having to deal with all those, you know, politenesses. So it's really an amazing time for this.
So we sort of identified 5 steps to sort of how we set up our working practice, and figured like perhaps these could apply to anyone else curious.
Because basically over the past 6 months, we've probably lived in 3 or 4 different states.
Yeah.
And, you know, gone camping and just kind of been able to work flexibly.
So step 1, this is probably most significant for me, is really to create your toolbox. So whatever you do, figure out a way to bring it with you and figure out tools that are really flexible. So obviously we all have most people have laptops or an iPad. We invested in satellite internet that we can bring with us anywhere, as well as like a pretty robust battery pack. And it seems crazy, but it's like, if we want to go camping for 2 weeks, like we can work from a campground, which is like, I find very inspiring.
And I traded in my Mac for this beast of a computer you see here, because it runs Revit and it can handle the horsepower. It's very funny, but
yeah, we both have our like kind of crazy things. I mean, basically wherever I travel, I bring a 3D printer with me now, which like seems insane, but it's actually quite doable. And obviously something nice about 3D printing too is like, it's a way to bring in clients. It's also like a secondary income source. So it's worked really well for us.
Like I said, we've kind of lived Rhode Island, upstate New York, downstate New York, Boston. And so one of the little things I do everywhere I go is I register us in Google, because if we've been starting to get more and more work that's outside of our network, actually, people that hear us or referral, or they literally Google designer Brooklyn. And we've got a number of calls that way. And so having good SEO and putting you on Google is usually like the first step to getting clients that are outside of your network. And it's also great in terms of architecture, because, you know, they want to know that you understand the area. And so this is just a great thing to have in your back pocket. That's where we are right now. If you see the studio den in the corner.
Yeah, we're on a teeny little island in Rhode Island.
This is probably the one closest to my heart, and also I feel like has taken us the farthest, is building your community. So these are all the different communities I'm a part of just over the years: the Wing, motorcycle community in Boston, Female Design Council, AA, RISD. And right now we've got work coming in from all these communities. And so kind of everywhere I've gone, I just kind of jump in with both feet into a new community. Female Design Council, I've only worked with virtually. And we've got a new client coming in from there. So this is just like lots of endless opportunities, but it's really just you introduce yourself as new and this kind of leads into the next step.
Yeah, I mean, it really is crazy. Like I have definitely talked to a lot of people that work for themselves that struggle to find jobs. And I always tell people, like, you can't just like check job boards. You have to reach out and find different communities. And this really makes like a huge difference.
And that kind of leads into just talk about what you want to do and your goals. I feel like this is underestimated, but there's, especially I know for myself, is whenever somebody says, I wish I could do this or I want to do this, I'm always listening for them. And so this is this is a great example. This was an art project we worked on very, very early on that wasn't really inside of our studio. It was just, I think 5 years ago, I said I want to do large scale public art. And that was just something I wanted to get into. I didn't know how. And then eventually, after talking about it, just the dots started connecting and I got introduced to other people that did large scale public art, and I was able to get this Boston's largest mural installed over this bridge.
Yeah, I think there's this misconception sometimes that like you have to have this grand unveiling of every idea and that like everything needs to be perfectly polished before you can sort of like open the curtains. And from what our experience has been, there's like nothing further than the truth. I mean, I think it's exciting to release things, but at the same time, I feel like people are open and eager to sort of become part of the process. And people are open to being scrappy. It doesn't have to always be.
I think it also like helps me refine that question of like, who am I? Also, I get to like practice each time to like see how I'm communicating with people. Even our studio is a little bit hard to explain sometimes. We say, oh, well, he does industrial design, I do architecture. And then I actually, get to work on my elevator pitch a little bit when I talk about what we want to do. This is an old, actually African proverb about if you want to go quickly, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. This is definitely, this is why I really wanted to have a partner from the beginning, is someone that complimented me and pushed me. But also, this has really been the key to being able to scale up or scale down when I'm taking on new projects, is checking in with old colleagues and friends that I might hire for a job or might need me for a job. What else would you?
Yeah, like we kind of mentioned this a couple slides later, but it's like so much of being a small business, I think, is being flexible. And we've noticed that like a lot of other small businesses are eager to collaborate and sort of to propel each other forward. And so much of it is like, we might partner with a design build firm because we don't necessarily have build capabilities right now, and they don't necessarily have architecture capabilities, but together we can tackle a project and appear on paper like we're an architecture and design build firm.
One of my, I think that goes into, you'll see this later, but one of my childhood best friends, she now runs a design build business, and they don't actually do design. So they partnered with us to handle the design and they do the build. And that's I hadn't talked to her in years, and she just kind of reached out because she saw the kind of work we've been doing. And that's been some pretty great ongoing work.
Totally. So here's a little kind of just snapshot of where we are today. We're on
We have
Block
a great
Island.
life.
Yeah, here's our Instagram life. No, we're on Block Island, but we've been able to travel and go all around New England and sort of take our work with us, and it's been a great way to sort of test that hypothesis. And so far, it's worked out really well. As far as streams of income, I guess what you guys have probably gathered at this point is we sort of have our hands in a lot of different things. I know on my side of things, I'm exploring internal products that we may launch down the road. I'm also doing a lot of just straightforward industrial design client work, especially for startups. And I'm also launching partnership products, like licensed products with different brands.
I've got a mix of new construction, renovations, and interiors projects going on. Some are like much sexier than others, where they're like in Manhattan on Broadway. Others are out in the boonies, and I'm working with a developer that just, wants to, make a good investment. So there's, a range of work that, we work on.
Yeah. These are a couple of companies that we have just formed partnerships with, and, a bunch of different sort of models. So, one might be more of a retainer model where I'm just a designer that is more or less on call for that company. Another may be a licensing deal, but an ongoing partnership where I would design something very closely to somebody's internal design team.
Those are very like traditional, I think, industrial design partnerships, which I'm learning from. And then the next two, Brightwood, which is my childhood friend, and Rinaldi Interiors they're basically using us to scale up their business. So Rinaldi just does interiors, but whenever she wants to scale up to architecture, we work together to do beautiful presentations. We collaborate on pieces. So that's just kind of some ongoing work that keeps us afloat, really, for when we want to work on, passion projects.
Totally.
In terms of architecture, architecture requires a little bit more finessing to work, wherever you want to work. So I've got a great network of people with me. And so our junior designer, May, is in Brooklyn, and she'll, run out to sites to go measure them or meet with clients. Chris is an old friend of mine that we've worked together for years on projects. And so if I need to send him out to go meet clients in Boston, I kind of have that network there in upstate. And Chris and Rachel are both, architects that are just at the edge of starting their own business. And so it's a nice relationship where we're, using our community to be able to expand the work that each of us can do.
So this is just a little snapshot of sort of how we currently make money. I would say it's probably at this point 75% service and 25% product. That is to say, like, I think in the future, how we want to make money is to basically have an inverse relationship there. And part of that is to expand our brand and do more and more products that we find exciting and we have control over. But another part of that, from a lifestyle point of view, is that I don't love being on the computer all day. And so I really want to start splitting my time more and more between sort of like physical prototyping and product development, and then still have some client work.
I would say that like this is kind of my main pain point with some design professions, especially architecture, is the amount of money you can make is based off of the hours you're able to sit at a computer. And we want to switch that model. And so it's like for the first few years, design services is going to float us, and then we're planning on switching it where it's the products that are basically creating this ongoing passive income.
Yeah, and so the next question is, how are we going to do that? We have a couple of studio-driven projects. These are just a few, but a few interesting examples. This one's an architecture project, and it's sort of this idea of what does a remote office look like if remote work continues to be the norm, which we believe it'll be. And so this is sort of a concept for like a little office that you would build outside of your home in like a backyard. The interesting thing about this is that it tests a few things that we're curious about in terms of sales and marketing and product. One is like, can we use this project to bring in potential developers to actually create some real structures? I think another is, can we just like release these plans and just sell the plans on our website and generate income in that way as well? So that's just one example. A second example is Jill and I and our junior designer did an exercise where we each designed 2 or 3 little lamps every week, and we did that for about 5 or 6 weeks and got a bunch of concepts out of it. And it was just like a great exercise for us and a great way to generate a bunch of work. And
and then we had it was very much like a midway critique, and we vetted them for kind of which ones we were most excited about, that we could actually turn into real products.
Totally. And I think the plan is to like reach out to companies that may be interested and start to like pitch some of these designs.
Yeah.